Welcome to part 2 of the Mega Yurt build. This series will document the start-to-finish build of a one-of-a-kind yurt, and in this episode we will tackle the rafters and compression ring, completing the wooden frame of the 16-foot lofted yurt. The compression ring is the single most important structural element of the yurt. A failure of this ring would result in a collapse, and we're not going to be taking any chances, as we build a beefier compression ring than one you can find anywhere else on the market. The compression ring is the wooden ring at the top of the yurt that all of the rafters connect to, and that provides a mounting point for the skylight. We start the compression ring off with some 2x10 lumber that I cut in half to make it easier to handle, as I run each board through the planer for a few passes. This takes care of any cupping or warping that can cause alignment issues later on in the build process. With our boards nice and flat, we bring them over to the miter saw, where we have to do a little quick math. What angle to set the miter saw at? We are going to be cutting 10 pieces that can be combined into one ring. The math nerds will recognize this shape as a decagon. A decagon has 10 interior angles that are each equal to 36 degrees. So we set the miter saw to half of that, or 18 degrees, and we proceed to cut the 10 pieces we need for the first ring and 30 more pieces so we can make the next 3 rings as well. After doing a quick test fit to make sure everything looked close, I label each piece to remember its location and make reference marks for my biscuit joiner. After the slots are cut to receive the biscuits, I do a final test fit and make minor adjustments to close any gaps. When you cut 10 pieces, all of the tiny errors of each cut accumulate, and you can expect there to be some minor corrections needed. It's time to crack open the first gallon of wood glue of many that will be used on this build, and get ready to glue up our first decagon. We start by ensuring that there is a healthy coating of wood glue on all of the surfaces to be bonded. We then insert the biscuits into one side of every piece and make sure there's a good coating of glue on them as well. With the glue applied, I have found that the easiest way to clamp it up is with a single strap wrapped around the outside and tightened until all of the gaps just close. I then like to check the alignment on the edges of each piece to make sure they are in plane with each other, and I use my hammer to lightly tap any high spots back into alignment. I have to glue up the rest of these decagons, so I'll explain why I use biscuits. The biscuit joiner works by cutting a half-moon slot out of each piece of wood to be joined, so that a small oval piece of wood, or biscuit, can be glued into the joint to increase glue surface area and help aid in aligning during the glue-up process. They are a fast and effective way of making these glue-ups a breeze, and because of the design of the compression ring, we don't actually need these biscuits to be strong. Or maybe we would consider going with dominoes or dowels. We're going to have to wait a day or two for the glue to cure before we can move on to the next step with the compression ring. So rather than take the afternoon off, we can get a head start on the rafters. Each rafter is a 2x6 by 8 feet long. Because the ultimate plan is to stain the rafters to roughly match the red oak lattice, we are going to run every rafter through the planer to remove any stamped logos and give them a cleaner face. With the rafters prepped, we come back to the rings and begin the next steps. First, we need to get any of the glue that's squeezed out scraped off. If you were smarter than me, you might have done that when the glue was still tacky and easy to scrape off with a putty knife. Instead, we will assault it with a chisel and sander, making sure that the one face that will be exposed in the final assembly gets some extra attention and looks clean. Now, I guess I got ahead of myself when I called this a ring, because as it stands, this decagon is going to need a little trim before he can ever call himself a circle. And it's time for one of my favorite jigs of the project. A simple piece of plywood that acts as a rotating arm and allows me to set my router at any point and cut a circle of any radius. We really only need to worry about 2 radii though, the larger outer circle of the ring and the smaller inner one. I designed the ring to have a 48-inch outside diameter and a 36-inch inside diameter for a ring width of 6 inches. This is my first trial using the router to cut the circle, and I am testing out how deep and fast I can push the router without causing it to overheat or bind. I was initially using the air compressor to blow out the sawdust that collected in the cut, but ultimately decided that wasn't necessary. We don't need to cut all the way through the circle at this stage, because we're going to trim off the excess and then come back with a flush trim router bit to get the rest of the circle cut to size. And there you have it, the first of 4 rings is done. Now we can use the same router jig as before to repeat the process the remaining 3 times and get all of our rings cut out, taking the time to scrape off any wood glue left over from earlier in the process and doing a bit of sanding when necessary. Anytime you need to make an exact duplicate of an existing piece, you can use a flush trim router bit and clamp the 2 pieces together, and the flush trim bit will trim the second piece down to perfectly flush with the first piece. Knowing that we have 4 rings to make and that we want each one to be identical, we can first get the rings cut to roughly the correct size, and then we can pick one of the pieces to serve as the template and trim all the rest so they are perfect clones. It's important when marking and cloning the pieces to offset the seams in each ring to stagger them like brickwork and prevent any weak point in the final assembly. I'm sure some of you will be able to relate, but personally I struggle with ADHD, and I find that I feel and operate my best in a clean, organized environment, but I fundamentally lack the organizational skills needed to keep my environment clean. So I force myself to clean up some of the shop mess and sawdust that has accumulated, and just like that, my head is clear and I'm ready to thrive once again. We focus our attention back to the rafters, and we begin by crowning each board and then cutting the angle for the top with the crown facing up. It isn't actually that necessary, as each rafter is never going to carry a significant load, but it is still a good building process nonetheless. When designing the yurt, I planned on a 30-degree angle for my roof pitch. I have previously built a yurt with a steeper 35-degree roof that allowed for more headroom when installing a loft, but 30 degrees is more typical, and we don't need the extra headroom in this build. The compression ring is one of the places you will see the most variation in design among the big yurt companies. Some go for a metal compression ring, others have wooden rings of all styles. Personally, I have chosen to use a steel pin to connect my rafters to the ring. So I set the drill press to 30 degrees, make a little jig to act as a fence, and mark all the hole locations and start drilling. Because our compression ring is 4 layers, totaling just about 6 inches tall, we need to do a little trim to our rafters to ensure they match up evenly with the top and bottom of the ring. We make the little trim necessary and then sand down the transition so it's nice and smooth and doesn't cause unnecessary friction with our liner. We move outside to cut down our 3/8 inch steel rod into lengths to act as pins in an effort to keep all those sparks from igniting the sawdust covered shop and burning it to the ground. I initially planned for and thought that using 2 pins would be the best method, but after doing a few test fits with a completed rafter, I found that it was too easy to get the holes slightly misaligned and have to really force it to fit. I instead decided to remove the upper pin and use a screw through the top of the rafter to prevent racking. It's time for the biggest glue up of the yurt build so far, and we want a healthy layer of glue here to ensure there is complete coverage in the finished joint. We can use clamps to get everything tight and properly aligned, and then use screws to clamp and hold the rings tight to each other while the glue cures. If we attempted to clamp all 4 rings together without the screws, they have a tendency to slide around a little, and it makes it hard to get them perfectly aligned. We can hide the fastener heads in the completed build, so it's the easiest way to go. After doing some sanding and then some more sanding, and a little more sanding just to make sure, we can finally move on to marking and drilling all of the holes that will receive the steel pins for our rafters. I know that my build will have 26 rafters, so I divide the circumference of the circle by 26 and mark the center of each rafter location. Whenever possible, I prefer to design a yurt with a multiple of 4 for the rafters. However, the math didn't quite work out for this one, so I have an odd number of rafters per side, at 13. We'll ignore that unlucky omen. It can be a challenge to drill a hole that is perfectly straight when you are drilling into a curved surface. However, I found that using my drill press attachment for my drill, I was able to get holes that were consistent and accurate enough, given that I accepted using only 1 pin. That extra hole can stand as a testament to an adapting design process. Call it a mistake. With the compression ring complete, all that's left is to stain it to match the red oak lattice and set it aside to focus on finishing the rafters. Now don't get all excited. I know you see that beautiful skylight in the background and you're dying to know how I made it. Well, that video isn't coming for a couple more days, so subscribe and stick around if you want to see. With the bottom angle cut on all the rafters, we need to cut the notch that's going to rest on the cable and support the weight of the roof. As they say, if you have to do something more than 5 times, make a jig. So we make a simple jig that allows us to use the flush trim bit on the router to cut an exact copy of the notch into every rafter right quick. With all 26 rafters for our 16-foot yurt cut, notched, and drilled, we can lay on a coat of stain to match the compression ring and set them aside. Click the subscribe button to follow along in the next video as we trade the typical dome skylight design for a custom-made octagon skylight. If you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you around. We're going boating, baby!